Just to remind you, this conversation is for informational and community purposes only. It's not medical, mental health, or professional advice. We're just sharing shared experiences and perspectives, and we encourage any listeners to seek care that's right for them. Welcome back to Seen Not Fixed, the Spoonly podcast. I'm Nicole Pedra, and this is a space for honest conversations about chronic illness, mental health, and the parts of living in a body that we don't always have control of. Today, I'm joined by Miel Johnson, who has spent years navigating her own multiple sclerosis sisters. She's been navigating that while also advocating fiercely for her children's health. Miel brings a deeply honest perspective on persistence, caregiving, and invisible labor. I am also joined by Meli Kirkwood, who approaches wellness through a nervous system first, trauma-informed lens. And she speaks powerfully about listening to the body instead of just pushing through. Welcome.
Excited
Thank
to be
you.
here.
So the first thing I want to talk about today, and the first question I have for you both is, do you remember the moment you realized your role had shifted from just living your life to advocating actively or caregiving for someone else?
I do remember clearly how my role shifted. First, I started to feel kind of like an outsider in my circle, especially because I was such a young person. I was 11 when things shifted for me. Things started to feel different, just different. And then I started doing other things that other people were not doing, like personal growth courses or going to the functional doctor or things that I wouldn't even speak with my friends because you don't know. And then as you are getting older, and then I started embodying more the health coach and the personal trainer and the fitness instructor, then I realized, oh, I do have a voice, and this is where I start advocating for others. So that's how I shifted from, I don't know what just happened, but I know something is off here, to, oh, now this is my role.
Right. Did you do that shift or some of those shifts when you were a kid, like 11? Or did it take you a while to actually get into the functional medicine and to start those things?
I was so lucky, and that's why I advocate this, because my mom was just learning in those years about functional health for herself. And so there is like a massive trauma that happens to me at 11. And it was almost like the universe was all put together so it can help me, which it was
Right.
so beautiful.
And how old are you, if you don't mind me asking, and what chronic illnesses do you have?
Yeah, I'm 42 right now, and
Wow.
thanks. And I lived undiagnosed with panic attacks for at least 8 to 9 years. And currently, I just discovered that I had some autoimmunity with Hashimoto's.
I'm already so excited for this because young age thing I know we can all relate to, and dealing with kids who are suffering from this.
So, Meli, when you were talking about your mom and the circle around your mom, that was something that I could really relate to. I have my own chronic illness diagnosis. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was 22. But then 2.5, 3 years ago, my middle son got very, very sick. He was falling through the growth chart and he was sleeping. He was exhausted, but it was a series of very non-specific symptoms. And I had always had to advocate for him as his mom. That's one of the things that you do as a parent. But it got to the point where I had to be much more aggressive in how I was advocating for him, because it was so very obvious that he was unwell. And it was equally obvious that we weren't sure what was wrong. We spent a lot of time essentially crossing things off the list. It's not this. If it's not this, then what is it next? Until we got to a diagnosis. And even after we got to the celiac diagnosis, he still wasn't getting better. So we had to keep digging. So absolutely understand what you say when you say you were fortunate to have a mom who was advocating for you.
We're so lucky with the moms here. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1998, and I'm sure you can relate to the fear of having your child diagnosed. My mom used to cry in the shower because she didn't want me to be scared. The reason I know how to advocate for myself is she pushed me. My mom's a huge reason I know what to do.
Yes, I think about that a lot with both of my children, that one day they'll be responsible for their own care. So having a mom who pushed you to do that is such a great step, because having someone advocate for you is such a benefit, but being able to do it for yourself effectively is a skill you have to learn.
Right.
I do have a question, Nicole. When you were diagnosed, I was 22, and it was unusual because most of the people who were being diagnosed
Mhm.
were in their
Older.
40s and had been experiencing symptoms for 15, 20 years. And I got very sick and was diagnosed in a relatively short period of time. Did you
Mhm.
feel relieved that there was a name for what was wrong with you?
No, because with childhood onset of multiple sclerosis, it's usually much more severe and intense. And what happens is you have so many lesions where an adult might be in the hospital 2 times a year. A kid would be in the hospital 8 or 6. And so my onset, I had Bell's palsy.
Mhm,
I couldn't walk
mhm.
and I couldn't feed myself. They thought maybe I had a stroke, maybe I had Lyme. So they clearly knew something was wrong. And it's hard being a child diagnosed with something that's maybe invisible or something you're ashamed of.
Mine is luckily very stable, so it
Right.
doesn't affect my
Me
life to
too.
the degree that a lot of people who live with MS have, but it's not something that I tell a lot of people about. And when my sons were diagnosed, my middle son particularly has been very open with the fact that he has celiacs. He tells people he's very conscientious about what he eats. He's very
Hmm.
conscientious about checking labels and making sure that things are gluten-free for him. It's really interesting to see how differently he reacted than I did, and I don't know if it's that we're different people or if it's that things are so different now. But it does seem like there's more acceptance of living with an ongoing health condition than there was when I was diagnosed. And you and I were probably diagnosed around the same time.
100%. And I bet, Meli, you can probably relate to that, right? Being older and where we were in culture when we were diagnosed or when your son was diagnosed, we didn't have the same acceptance. I mean, there's still a lot of work to do, but people are accepting of this more. Mental health wasn't a appropriate thing 20
Mm-mm.
years ago.
More on that, we'll say I was born and raised in a Latin country in South America.
Mm.
And really, nobody diagnosed me because nobody knew what a panic attack was. Even in the United States, was a really new concept in 1995. And there is me having all these panic attacks and feeling like I'm about to die. And I'm in the middle of school. And if I go to recess or if I do an activity that is not safe for me, I will have a panic attack. And I didn't understand why. And it wasn't until I moved to the States that at 21, my mom finally saw a pamphlet somewhere and she said to me, I think you're experiencing this. And I read it and it in a way felt a relief because at least there's some answers for what my body is feeling.
Mhm.
But wow, it took me into just so many unanswered things when I was younger. So
Mhm.
I was grateful to understand what I was experiencing because now I can be proactive.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
but as a younger person going through things, and like you said, now being celiac, everybody's on a gluten free diet. So
Can you explain what you mean by safe? Because I think when people think of being safe causing panic attacks, they think of like they're in a plane and there's turbulence, but I think it definitely means something else.
yeah, so coming from trauma, my body wanted to feel safe in environments that they were known. So, for example, if I was in my bedroom listening to my music, that was a safe place. But if my friend will ask me to go to the mall and just go shopping, my body could experience some sort of panic because it was unknown, like what was
Mhm.
going to happen at the mall, how many people are going to be there, who's going to watch me. But I didn't understand that until later. But now that I think about my life, this was what's happening.
Yeah. So moving on to the next question. What is advocacy for yourself or someone you love? And why is it so central to navigating chronic illness?
When I was sick, I had very nonspecific symptoms, and so did my middle son before he was diagnosed. And so the advocacy around, no, I am sick. No, he is sick. We need to figure out why my son doesn't feel well. I need to understand why I don't feel well, required me to keep asking questions. And I absolutely had a doctor who told me it will either get better on its own and go away. It will stay like this forever or it will get worse. And I said that that's not helpful. That isn't an answer. So I had to keep asking questions until I got to an answer. And then for my son, the advocacy wasn't just the diagnosis, that was the starting point. The advocacy has very much been education around you can eat things like this, you can't eat things like that. You need to be able to say when you're with your friends, no, I can't trade. You know, you can't touch my lunch. No, you can't do these things because if he gets gluten, it will make him sick. So there's the advocacy for the diagnosis, but then there's the ongoing advocacy for how do you continue to educate yourself and the people around you so that you can stay well.
Advocacy for me, it's a lot of the diagnosis part of it. One, because of being Latina, sometimes, you get pushed away in certain things as well. But also, if I look back on the functional medicine portion of it, my labs started to show something was wrong. My ferritin iron was pretty low. It was actually pretty depleted. My vitamin D was really low. Nobody ever really went, hey, we should evaluate this a little bit further. And nobody took the time to sit down with me and say this type of diet could potentially give you more beneficial impact into the healing process. So to me, when I see patients, I want to make sure that I can read all their labs. What are your labs saying? I can actually review your diet. What is your practice on a daily basis? You're stressing your body more. So that's advocacy of really seeing the big picture. And there's that advocacy of understanding that because you went through trauma, that doesn't determine that's going to be your life forever. And
Hmm.
really finding the solutions of how to bring your body back into that safety and those practices. So to me, everything that I do is building that capacity of a person through
Mhm.
their nervous system regulation, through their nutrition. So
Hmm.
I advocate that a lot. Like you can actually be in the healing process, even though you've experienced the most traumatic experience of all
Right.
times.
I think a very important part of that is always kind of getting a second opinion or asking questions. You don't have to have all the answers, but you have a responsibility to ask questions.
I agree. And Meli, I wanted to talk a little bit about what you were talking about with nutrition, because in so many cases with chronic illness, I think we talk about, oh, you got on medicine, you'll be fine. And that's just one piece of the ongoing treatment. It is absolutely, are you getting enough sleep? Are you doing things that do regulate your nervous system? Are you eating well? Are you taking care of yourself and your nutrition? I joke with my kids all the time, you have to go outside and be in the sunshine. It's good for you. But I do think that that's a piece of advocacy and wellness that sometimes gets overlooked because people just assume, oh, you were diagnosed and here's medicine for you, you'll be fine. And that's not usually the case.
Well, I think also a barrier to that is the cooking part. Like, how do you guys handle meal prep and make it easy and digestible? Because I know for me, my husband will buy groceries and then I feel like there's nothing. And with my ADHD, I want something I can just grab and eat, right? Because the thought of having to cook is too multi step for me.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about working in this space is like helping people understand that you can still nourish yourself, eat healthy, and no need to prep, those recipes that shows up in in Instagram, for example. I'm like, who has the time to cook that way?
Yeah.
But you can still, eat something very healthy and quick and be done. And that's what I love teaching people.
So, Mia, what is your opinion on the meal prep? Oh, I mean, you've got kids. My husband's 6'7". I can't meal prep because he eats everything in one go. Like, if I make a pound of chicken, it doesn't last a few days. He eats it at once.
Yeah, meal prep with kids who have food intolerance, food avoidance. My youngest son is incredibly picky, eats a very limited number of things. My middle one, it's day to day. I will make scrambled eggs one day and he'll eat them. And then the next morning he'll push them away and say, "Why would you make those? I don't like scrambled eggs." And I'm thinking, "You ate them yesterday. What changed between yesterday and today?" It is really hard. Luckily, with gluten intolerance being more and more common, whether it is a trend and people are going gluten free for health or whether it's because they've been diagnosed as celiacs and need to avoid gluten, there are more options. I will say it's very much trial and error. Some gluten free items are good and some are not as good as we would like. It is so much trial and error. It is so much hoping that what I make, they will eat. And really trying to talk to them about, believe me, I would rather eat Cheetos and drink Dr. Pepper too, but need you to eat protein and something that looks like it was at one point a vegetable. Please
Right.
try that. And it's really hard. And I will say as a mom, I do deal a lot with whether it's explicit or I'm just assuming people who are judging me because my youngest son does eat so poorly. People will talk about, well, you just have to make him eat vegetables. And I'm like, the one time someone tried that, he threw up on them. I, so I know it sounds like it's so easy, but it's not. And it's hard. But then I'll talk to my friends who also have children who are very picky, who also have chronic illnesses. And it's really nice to have a community of people who say, nope, my kid doesn't like that. We tried this. And it goes back, Nicole, to what you're talking about. When I was diagnosed, people didn't talk about this. And now, 25 years later, people do talk about it. And so I'm lucky that I have people around me who have maybe not the same experience, but similar situations
Right.
where they can share this worked, this didn't work. We tried this, we've seen this doctor, we did this. Because, like you were saying with functional medicine, Meli, there are a lot of complementary things as well. But
Mhm.
meal planning, meal prep. I live with my mom. Every week she comes home with something new gluten free that she has found at the store just to see if my kids will eat it.
Yeah, not to mention too, kids having a problem with textures. And
Oh,
that's something that parents would be like, you better eat this or you're not leaving the table. But I have cousins and people I know who have a serious issue with textures. They only get protein through their shakes.
It's so hard to explain that to people because, like I said, my youngest son lives on like three or four things. I can't get him to eat other things. We've done food therapy. It's been helpful, but not as helpful as we were hoping. And I wish my child would eat salmon and blueberries. That would be the greatest day of all time if he would eat, even 2 bites of salmon and like a blueberry. We would probably have a parade. But at some point, and I had this conversation with my middle son's doctor, it's quantity over quality. I just have to get calories in him. Even if they're not the best calories, I have to make sure that something's going in. So
Yeah.
I try not to beat myself up too much. And I tell other parents whose kids are on a similar path. Some days the best you can do is we drank a Pediasure and he took 1 bite of rice, and that was the best we could do that day. And that's just what good looked like for that day.
How do you figure out, this is for both of you, because you mentioned good gluten free and bad gluten free. Is it just how your body reacts or is it something in the ingredients?
For us, it comes down to texture. Sometimes it doesn't taste great. For us, it's a lot of the baked goods and the texture. We find that a lot of them fall apart when you try to
Mhm.
cook them, so you have to toast them so that they stay together.
Why are they always so small? Why?
They're so tiny. Well, the other thing too is they are expensive. We got 4 hamburger buns, and I think it was $13 for 4 hamburger buns.
Yeah, the cost barrier.
And so it can be really hard not only to find one that you like, and then just it's very, very expensive. But
Mhm.
Melly, sometimes I feel like it does push us to eating more things that are whole foods and more things that are less processed, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, and that's the point, to be honest. And this is the nutritionist in me is that gluten free really is about wholesome and wholesome foods. And yes, there's been a trend, but also it's been a disservice a bit, right, to the celiac community because we are now in this trend and we're producing all the things that we in reality maybe shouldn't be eating as often in production of gluten free items that actually, when you're mentioning, well, is it good or is it bad? It depends because it actually can have more ingredients and more ingredients that can spike blood glucose. So, yeah, you might be eating a gluten free product, but it is dysregulating your blood sugars. And that's the one thing that you truly don't want. So,
Mhm.
the more wholesome foods that we can give, the better. And, like to your point, Miel, sometimes when you have picky eaters, this is where supplementation in a way comes a long way just because if they're not getting all the nutrients, because the ideal is variety, right? That's the game.
Mhm.
And that's the game for the gut health. But if a person is not able to eat diversity, which is totally fine depending on
Mhm.
condition, then you will have to rely a little bit more on that supplementation, or you have to rely
Mhm.
more on those all in one protein shakes that have all the vitamins. And then that will be like a little bit of a solution for some.
So I want to talk about kind of responsibility. How does constant responsibility change your relationship to your own body? Maybe how you feel about it. It's just like so much responsibility to protect your own body. Does that have some mental effects? I mean, I guess the anxiety could be a side effect of that.
If we're talking about how all this shifted mentally and physically for me, learning from now 21 or 22 that I needed to eat a more blood glucose regulated diet. So it did put me in a little bit of a space of being too aware. And I wouldn't say that that's a positive thing. And then I also realized how that was impacting my nervous system. So it's almost like I learned and then I had to unlearn. So did put a little bit of pressure for sure, taking care of myself, a little bit more too aware than the regular individual.
I remember when I was first diagnosed, I was very conscious about what I was eating, what I was doing. And then I remember looking at my mom and saying, I don't want to be sick anymore. I don't want to have to do this. It's not fun. Everyone
Hmm.
else gets to go and do these other things, and I can't. When I was diagnosed, I was doing a once a week injection, and I had really bad side effects.
Next.
Yes.
They were horrible. I took that as a kid.
Mm.
The chills and the fevers all night on the couch.
Yep.
I know how you feel.
Well, I always told people it felt like I was coming down with the flu for 24 hours after I
Awful.
it was horrible. I was like, "I'm tired of being sick. I don't want to do this anymore. This is not fair." So when my kids are like my youngest son had to give up Kit Kats, which is his favorite candy, but for Halloween, we were trick or treating, and he's like, I really want to eat a Kit Kat again." And I was like, "I know." He's like, "I can never have a Kit Kat ever again." And, he's young and even he recognizes that he can, but he's like, "It's not fair." He's like, "Why can't I have Kit Kats? It's not my fault." And it's hard, and Nicole, I don't know how your mom felt about this, but it's hard to watch my kids recognize those things so young.
Yeah, and I struggle with that with things like coordination in sports. Like, why is my body just not following what my mind wants it to? Why can't I run as fast? Like, I'm in good shape. Why can't I run? Because I can't pick my legs up that quickly.
Mhm.
It's a whole mess.
It is. It is. It very much is. And I do think sometimes the fact that I went through something like this where I can say, I know it's not fair. I know this isn't what you want to be doing. I'm sorry.
Okay, I want to go back to vitamins.
Yeah.
We're not recommending what people should take, but I don't take any. What do you recommend for people?
Nutrition is personalized for me. So if you give me that wide, plate, I wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to answer you anything. But if you tell me, okay, is it for general health, well being, or what is your take there?
Kind of think like as a female who's late 30s, we'll say, what is important that maybe typically people aren't getting? I definitely don't get enough protein, I have to admit it, but you can't take a pill for protein.
So as a female, okay, so if you're telling me female health 35 plus, let's say it that way, I would love for them to get labs first to see where the iron is, because iron is something that we are deficient lately in. Vitamin D, because vitamin D truly is a hormone and it actually will start impacting our metabolism. The thyroid will get impacted if vitamin D is pretty low. So sometimes people out there are getting diagnosed with thyroid issues,
Mhm.
yet their vitamin D is pretty low. But here's the trick: if you actually support the iron and the vitamin D, you see the thyroid actually functioning better. I will say those are the two things, vitamin D and iron. And of course, a fish oil or some sort of fatty, right? It can be SPMs too, that will help support inflammation because as we're entering into those perimenopausal years, we are going to start experiencing a bit more insulin resistant and inflammation. So it's good to support it. I
Yeah.
go food first. And if I see a person doesn't eat enough fishy items like anchovies, sardines, or, same
Mhm.
the fatty ones, then I will tell, hey, maybe it is time to support. It's very good for cognitive health.
I love the way you went into this talking about the important things to look at first because everyone is different. I'm actually surprised, I'm not vitamin D deficient, which is so rare,
Mhm.
especially with MS, right? So people think, oh, I need vitamin D, but unless you're deficient, if you're eating enough and getting those vitamins elsewhere, you don't need to be overdoing it. So I love that you went into the conversation saying that first rather than just recommending vitamins. So, what do you think gets dismissed as anxiety when it's like actually a biological response to long term stress?
We need to first understand the nervous system
Hmm.
and the stress cycle and the completion of a stress response. So, for example, we're always in aliveness, we're in calm, and right now, let's say that somebody startled you right now and you just really went into this panic mode. But if you didn't shake it off, or if you didn't laugh about it, if you really held it in into your physical body, we call it as like somatic hold in the body,
Hmm.
then it stores and you never complete that stress cycle, let's say. So when a situation like that happens again, that's when a person says, oh, I have anxiety for that. But in true reality is an experience that never really completed the stress response. So the nervous system didn't have time to heal it, right? We see it all the time in animal kingdoms where there's a tiger following the bird and then the bird gets like really startled. And then when that chase stops, the bird shakes it off. That's how they complete their stress response. As humans, right, we need to be so in tune with our bodies and really, when we're experiencing those high chronic stressors, let's say a caregiver like Miel, right? She's already going through a lot of her own struggles, but then there's the stress response now, the taking care of the kids. So if she's not completing all those chronic stressors that are happening on a daily, she's actually accumulating it in her body. Me, as a practitioner, at least, I make a person be aware of it and tune into their bodies and create practices on a daily basis to be able to once again go back into that term safety, to make the
Wow.
body feel safe again. And that way we are completing those stress responses.
I have extreme hypervigilance and I feel like I go into fight or flight mode very quickly.
Mhm.
Also, there are certain situations that will give me panic attacks. And then I get the, the crying that does that breathing. And I'm aware of it, but how do you move that so it's not like that? The hypervigilance kills me.
Next time that happens, tune into your body and really ask your body, what is it that you're truly feeling? Where do you feel it in your body and where does it come from? Because
Instead of the brain.
yeah, but most of the time there was something, a situation or something that really sparked it, and then your brain, your mind, your heart held it. And anybody that will, let's say, yell at you or give you feedback a specific way reminds you of that situation. And that's where things happen. That's very interesting. Like, to me, the
Yeah.
body is so fascinating because it really tells you so much for your own
Mhm.
healing.
And how about you, Miel? What do you think gets dismissed when it's actually a biological response?
For me, it's always sleep. I find that I have a hard time sleeping when I'm very stressed out or when there are a lot of things going on. And a lot of times it gets dismissed as you're older, you're not going to sleep as well, or you're not doing the right things to have good sleep hygiene. It's hard to have a conversation with somebody where I'm saying, no, I'm not sleeping well. And they're saying, well, that's just how it's going to be. Don't worry about it. So sleep is always one of the big things. But Melly, I definitely understand with the storing of the stress and the safe space and feeling safe and completing that stress response so that it doesn't get trapped.
And so I want to move on a little bit to listening without pushing through. What has helped both of you better understand what your body is communicating? Is it those deep breaths to calm down, lower the shoulders? What has really helped you better understand what your body's saying?
To me, it has to go and boil down to really taking a daily 5 minutes to sit down in the quiet. And it can be deep breaths, honestly, it can be journaling, or it can be just simply looking at a candle. But if you can take just 5 minutes to sit down on a quiet space and listening to what your body is telling you in that moment at the time of what it needs and you tending it in that way. So let's say that I'm sitting down this morning and you know what? I actually miss hugs and I give myself a big self hug. I think the more we are able to take some time for ourselves in the quiet, which is really rare because nowadays we have phones and we have kids running around or anything, and you really dedicating those 5 minutes on a daily, I think that if you make that as a practice, nothing else, just like 5 minutes, sit down, zero noise, you're able to tune in as events start happening in your life. You are more self aware of what you are feeling. And that's like, I feel that that's a practice of mine that it's non negotiable. I really need to wake up and be quiet for 5 minutes, and then the rest of the world continues.
I agree. I meditate to get that quiet time. I think it's so important to have some time where it's just me and it's quiet and I'm not thinking about what's next on my to-do list. I'm not thinking about the laundry, the dog, my kids, dinner, my inbox, none of that. It's just that time to just be still.
So I want to talk about myths. What myth about caregiving or wellness do you wish people would let go of?
The myth of eating healthy is easy.
Yeah.
It's a myth that exactly what Miel was saying, that as a nutritionist, when you go to school, you're learning textbook items. You are learning that salmon is amazing for the brain and the blueberries and antioxidants. Yet when you go into practice or people get judged, especially if a person is in anxiety or depression, people get judged. Oh, you're just eating junk food and you don't take decisions. It's so easy to grab something healthy and wholesome. Guess what? No, it's not. It's not easy, especially if you're in depression and anxiety. It takes so much energy from your body that you really cannot think. And guess what? At the end of the day, they also have brain inflammation. So you really cannot think straight.
Mhm.
So I get really bothered coming from the health and wellness fitness industry that some trainers, some people, some coaches are like, it's so easy. They don't have the power, they don't have the mindset. I'm like, you don't understand. It's not easy. So that is a myth that I am here to also represent, is that I want to make sure that you nourish yourself. And if we, once again, if we need to go to supplementation or other things to make it much easier for the meantime, great. But I don't think it's easy.
I don't know how much of a myth it is, but the one thing that I always come back to is that you need to take a break. You cannot be a caregiver 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You always need a break, and that's not selfish. It's good for you to take a break. It doesn't have to be all of the time in the world, but you do need a break, and it's not selfish to take that break.
Yeah. Meli, just a comment on what you were talking about. I wish more people understood that it changes, right? You feel good, you're productive, and then you go into this slump. We chase being what we were the day before. I know I struggle with that. I'm like, why am I not getting anything done? Why do I feel so lazy, right? And then all I want to be is productive. I think we have to really understand that our body goes through different stages, and that's okay.
Yeah, the cycles and the rhythms. And you see that more and more in autoimmune conditions, right? Where somebody with Hashimoto's, maybe your joints are hurting more that day, or maybe somebody with MS that doesn't have the energy or the power. And even though you want to push through, we live in a society where it doesn't really respect the rhythms and the cycles of life, including women's health. So
Mhm.
we need to be really conscious about advocating, goes back to advocating for ourselves. You know what? Actually, this is a rest day, or
Right.
this is a day that I'm not going to cook as much. And whenever I have the energy, maybe I'll put healthier food in my mouth, you know? So, yeah, those are the little changes I hope, whenever I see people, they understand that I'm here to support them in that way and not be another person that is pushed through.
Yeah. So, my final question is, if a caregiver or someone is listening that feels invisible, what do you want them to hear today?
You're not invisible. the people that you're caring for rely on you in a lot of ways, and it's not always easy, but their doctors, the people on their healthcare team, they see you, they appreciate you. You may not hear it, but you are important. You're not invisible. It does sometimes feel like a lot of work. Sometimes it's a lot of thankless work, but it is important. And you do have to take time for yourself because you are human. You do need to take that time and recharge and reset.
Yeah, and I think this message will be for all the moms that were the person that stood next to us, even though my own mother was going through her own grief and her own conditions. She put me first. So I'm just like really grateful for those caregivers that took their time in pushing through for us to grow and be the person that we are now. So they're not invisible. All their efforts are actually paying off. And that's why I think every caregiver should give themselves a big hug because all the efforts that they're doing is just so incredible. And I'm just so grateful, specifically for my mom, for being able to be
Mhm.
there for me.
So, since we're talking about moms, what I want to say is because every mom is so different. Not everyone has the same education background. You might be a type A mom or a type B mom. And no matter what kind of mom you are doing your best.
Mhm.
And what you're doing matters. You're helping your child. You can never be perfect. You can never help them as much as you want. But the effort you're putting in today, they are learning by example,
Mhm.
right? And they might not appreciate the stuff that you're making them do now, like calling and making your own appointments. I used to hate when my mom did that, but that is going to prepare them for the future. That's what I want them to know. And thank you, Mom. Okay, so I want to thank both of you for this conversation. Hopefully, some dads don't put all the work on the moms. I know my dad has come to one doctor's appointment, bless his heart. But if this conversation resonates with you, I want you to know that you're not alone and we are here to sit beside you. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.